A Norseman should value his honor over his life. Vinland Saga is set in a ruthless period of time where physical strength or power, or even one's bloodline, can take you anywhere and grant you the ability to be anybody and do anything. The most violent, the most powerful win. This is a period when a man's pride and honor are more valuable than anything. A time when war is everything. It's a time when a father will teach his son how to fight and wield a weapon, and he will send his son off to war, proud of the fathers, brothers, and sons that his son will kill. In this story, the glorification of war has touched every corner of Europe, even the secluded Iceland. In the year 1002, as we follow a young Thorfinn back in Iceland, the young men still dream of battle, and children here still run around with their wooden swords, pretending to be warriors, aspiring to kill their enemies. Valhalla is the reward for those who die in battle, a reward reserved for men and only for warriors. When it's announced that they will be going to war, they celebrate as if they've been waiting their whole lives for this moment, and they have. To fight and to kill is every man's calling. It is their purpose. Thorfinn, in these early chapters, is no different. He is one of the many victims of this romanticization of war. As a boy, he even criticizes his ancestors for running away from it. The way Thorfinn sees the world and responds to its many trials and tribulations is that of a child who has grown up in this culture. He gets angry and aggressive when play fighting amongst his peers. The other adults are impressed when he breaks one of the other kids' arms. A born warrior, they call him, because he has his father's blood. Thorfinn wants to be a warrior so badly. He wants to go on an adventure more than anything. He wants to be respected like his father. So much so that he begs Leif to accompany him on his journeys every time he returns home. So much so that he sneaks onto his father's ship as they head into what he believes will be one of the greatest battles he has dreamed of. Thorfinn is but a product of his surroundings. Once our protagonist sees the great Thors die unfairly at 6 years old, he responds as any child who dreams of war could. He vows to avenge his father. He spends the next 11 years of his life wholly entrenched in his quest for vengeance, throwing away any and all lessons that Thors instilled in him, and disregarding the family he left behind. Eyes have great significance in this story. When Thorfinn's father is taken down by Askeladd, Thorfinn's eyes become those of a man, though he is still only a boy, filled with hate in his heart. Eyes that resemble Askeladd's. Whether it was his father's lingering voice speaking to him as it did in the first chapter, or simply his lust for revenge blinding him to anything other than his goal. Thorfinn wasn't as bad as the other Vikings, but he wasn't a good person either. During one of Thorfinn's first raids, he is injured on English soil. A young warrior, he gets nursed back to health by English farmers, and an old lady saves him from local soldiers. As compensation, he warns them about the incoming Vikings, burning a nearby shack to signal their arrival. When the farmers don't leave, Thorfinn sees the old lady again. His look is one of great remorse. This Thorfinn hasn't entirely changed yet, because in that moment, his eyes revert to how they were when he was just a child. It's a jarring contrast as his face and top are filled with blood, but his eyes are filled with great sorrow. You realize how tragic this all is. We hear Thorfinn is only 10 years old, and he has chosen this cruel life. As the men behind him grin on their way to pillage and kill, Thorfinn takes a breath, and then his eyes mature once again. They regain that hateful look. I think this was the moment when he flushed any sense of morality he had down the drain. He then joins the Vikings in their pillaging. It's what he must do to avenge his father, to regain his father's honor. At 10 years old, he wasn't as bad as the other Vikings, but still, he killed innocents and pillaged their homes. He didn't partake in the sexual assault that the Vikings did, but he still turned a blind eye to it all. There wasn't any joy in his conquests, unlike Askeladd's band, and yet he continued to follow them because he was so laser-focused on his goal. Thorfinn would do anything and ignore any deed, no matter how vile, if it meant being one step closer to killing Askeladd. In the second chapter, the leader of the Vikings says that everyone is a slave to something, and in that very chapter, a slave speaks to Thorfinn, sensing that he and she are alike, given his situation. Thorfinn refutes this idea, calling himself a free man. But the boy has no ideals, no values, and no motives beyond his current goal. Thorfinn has become a slave to vengeance, and Askeladd holds his chain. The relationship between Thorfinn and Askeladd is so interesting because Askeladd is such a massive part of Thorfinn's life, making his relationship with the audience rather unique. Askeladd is a terrible person. He has wiped out entire villages of innocent people. His men do awful, terrible things. They are terrible people. And yet sometimes it feels like the worst thing he does in this story is manipulate this child. Despite it all, Askeladd becomes hard to hate, considering his charm, charisma, and intelligence. It feels so wrong to say it, but Askeladd becomes a father figure to Thorfinn, no matter how badly we want to refute that idea for Thorfinn's sake, and how badly Thorfinn himself refutes it. In Ragnarok, Thorfinn dreams of his fallen father, who asks him to protect his sister and mother. Thor also asks him to give up on his quest for revenge, asking his son if he thinks this quest makes him happy. The young warrior wakes up and sees his bandmates forcing themselves on a captured girl. He looks down on them but does nothing. In the episode before this, he mentions how he hates war. Subconsciously or consciously, I'd argue that there is a part of Thorfinn that knows what he is doing is senseless, because it's been 11 years and he hasn't gotten any closer to taking Askeladd down. But at the same time, it's been 11 years. He can't just walk away. He saw his father as a hero, Thor's the troll, and he died in a way that was so unfair and dishonorable. Thor's won the duel, and still, he died. For Thorfinn, what would that say of him if he just lets his father's killer roam free, knowing he had a chance to avenge him? Askeladd uses this to his advantage, but he does show Thorfinn a level of respect that he doesn't show anyone other than Bjorn. Askeladd repeatedly says how he hates the Vikings, he hates Norsemen. But with Thorfinn, he lectures the boy about history and subtly informs him about what he's after. In critical moments, Askeladd even trusts Thorfinn, like when he entrusts the young warrior to look after Prince Canute. When it's time to fight Thorkel, he nurses the boy back to health while coaching him against the giant. When Askeladd fights his former Viking comrades, Thorfinn aids him without question. The leader of the Vikings doesn't hate Thorfinn the way he hates all Norsemen, because Askeladd never hated Thor's either. In fact, in their soul encounter, Askeladd recognizes Thor's as an ideal and respects him immensely. Sure, he might have said he was joking about Thor's leading his band, but there was undoubtedly some truth to it. I think Thor's was a man Askeladd wished he could have been. After their duel, he tells Thor's that he acknowledges him, respects his wishes, and leaves the boat. That final look on Askeladd's face when signaling his men to kill Thor's was one of disappointment. Askeladd, after years of worrying that he would be killed in his sleep as he did to his father, slowly came to understand that Thorfinn truly is the son of Thor's, with the potential to change. Part of that was the fact that Thorfinn sought a level of honor in his revenge. He says he wants to take Askeladd down in a fair duel. That was his goal. As if there was any honor shown to Thor's when he was shot down. Askeladd recognized Thorfinn's soft streak and tried to use it to stray the boy off this path. But no matter how many times he lost to the Viking, no matter how many visits from Thor's in his dreams, nothing could stray Thorfinn from this path. Not even a reunion with Leif Erikson, who had been searching for Thorfinn for the past decade, could talk sense into him. Thorfinn, instead, continues to choose rage, allowing it to erode his memory and his morality. Only a child when he lost his father, he was beginning to lose his father's guidance as well. As Thorkel pointed out, Thorfinn is embarrassed. Embarrassed that he has spent the last 11 years going against every word and action his father taught him, because it only got in the way of his anger and hatred. As Thorkel says, Thorfinn wasted those precious years. Thor's died staying true to his philosophy, believing that he left a lasting message for himself, his own beliefs, and for his son. Yet Thorfinn has thrown it all away. When Thorkel detects this, it triggers the young warrior. There is nothing inside Thorfinn but waning fury. He has no way of living up to Thor's, and yet he feels like revenge is the only way at this point to truly honor his father and make him proud. But Thorfinn can't just go back home now. He says he hasn't done enough. He can't just go and face his mother and sister again with nothing to show for it. Masculinity plays a big part in this society and shapes the Norse world. What does it say of him as a man, as Thor's only son, if he comes home without restoring the honor of their family? The only way his culture has taught him how? He will be branded a coward, someone who ran away, the same way he ridiculed his ancestors when he was just a child. Moreover, what would Helga and Ylva think? Would they be proud of the man they see? A man who has killed, pillaged, and plundered alongside the most savage Vikings? And all for what? When Thorfinn continues on this path with no end in sight, it becomes staggering when you juxtapose Thorfinn's lack of growth with Knut's progress. Knut now has the eyes of a changed man. He doesn't have the eyes of a naive child anymore. He now has the same pitying regard as those who seek a better life, whereas Thorfinn only searches for revenge. Knut is offered vengeance by Askeladd for killing his father figure Ragnar, yet Knut declines, and we see where their paths diverge. We see how alike and yet different they are. Regardless, Thorfinn marches on. He then takes on Askeladd in what would be their final duel, the most one-sided and heartbreaking one. Coming off Bjorn's death, which generated a certain level of anger towards Askeladd, Thorfinn is now here demanding another duel. Without his weapon, Askeladd embarrasses Thorfinn and finally tells him about his past and his own personal desire for vengeance. How his mother was a slave and his father was a terrible man, but a powerful king, and how ashamed he is of his own blood. Askeladd explains to Thorfinn what real hatred looks like. It isn't respect, it isn't obedience, it isn't honor among warriors like Thorfinn believes. There is no honor in hatred and vengeance. It is cold-hearted, calculated, and ruthless, just like how Askeladd planned and killed his father in 2 years. Thorfinn has been around for 11 years, Askeladd tells him, and shows him in their duel that they are not the same. They are not built the same. Essentially, he is telling Thorfinn to give up on his quest. Askeladd doesn't know what it's like to have a sister or a father who loves him. He doesn't know what it's like to have a community working together to care for each other. Askeladd parallels Thorfinn, but he lives as a cautionary tale. They both desire nothing more than revenge, but Askeladd was never able to move on from killing his father. He could never put behind him the nights when his mother yearned for King Artorius to return. He just couldn't do it, because that was all he knew. He didn't have anybody to tell him to become a true warrior, to tell him that he had no enemies. For Askeladd, everyone was his enemy. He demonstrates this when forced to choose between Wales, his home, his mother, and Knut. He cuts the king down and yells at Thorfinn to stay back, allowing Knut to kill him. For political reasons, of course, but also to free Thorfinn of his burden. I think Askeladd makes a conscious choice to try and steer Thorfinn, whom he sees so much of himself in, towards a different path. Askeladd took his vengeance away to ensure that this kid, who has had the privilege of being the son of the great Thors, doesn't become like him, maybe out of respect for the troll. Or maybe he felt sorry for Thorfinn. We'll never know. Now, there is truly nothing for Thorfinn. More than the fact that this hatred has brought him nothing, it's that it is so taxing to hate someone to the level that Thorfinn did for as long as he did. Every morning, every night, every waking moment is spent dedicating so much of himself to entering that state of mind. 11 years of rage have boiled inside him, now gone in a few seconds. Couple that with the conflicting emotions Thorfinn has developed towards Askeladd, and he is so confused and lost. Thorfinn has come to respect and even see Askeladd as a father figure. He's just a kid who needed guidance, and he got it in the form of this evil, terrible man. For the second time, he's lost a father figure and could do nothing about it. And for Thors, he now has nothing to honor him by, nothing to help his soul rest. We know that eyes are symbolic in this story. Eyes that rage, eyes that pity others, innocent eyes. Look at Thorfinn's eyes in this panel as he watches the reason for his existence slowly bleed out. These are not the eyes of a man filled with anger or hatred anymore. No, these are the eyes of a man filled with deep, deep sadness, and worse, emptiness. For so many years his identity had become synonymous with vengeance, and now he's lost it. Thorfinn has become a man with nothing inside, and he's realized that he has forsaken his father's ideals for a fruitless quest. For his crimes against the prince, Thorfinn becomes a slave, and how he is depicted here gives us an idea of how much he's changed. Thorfinn has always been small, but as a slave, his stature is even more diminished. He's lost a ton of weight, surviving on crumbs of bread for lunch. He is so apathetic to his own existence that he won't even ask for more. He's so different now. He used to be vulgar as a Viking, taking what he wanted and doing only what benefited him. A slave to no one, he once said. But now, he's a lifeless man going through the motions, a man who doesn't even desire freedom. He doesn't even want to go home. Hell, Iceland hasn't been his home for over a decade. He has no home. Thorfinn says something that enslaved people often feel in this series. What's so great about living? Thorfinn asks. What does he have to look forward to? His days are nothing but agony, and his nights are haunted by nightmares. Even Thor's words of wisdom now barely reach his memory. After 10 years of anger, he no longer feels worthy of his father's words. Now, he is nothing. Thorfinn has reached rock bottom and is ready to die. Yet, as his body reacts to Snake, he opens up the possibility of having a subconscious desire to live. And now, he is forced to investigate that desire through the life he now lives. For the first time since becoming a slave, Einar shows him great kindness. Despite Einar's hatred for warriors, despite the fact that people like Thorfinn are the reason he is a slave and has no family, he treats Thorfinn as a friend. These acts are enough for Thorfinn to consider what he might gain from living. The fact that Einar, who has been enslaved his whole life, can still be kind despite his circumstances, makes Thorfinn wonder why. What good has life given Einar, and yet he still desires freedom? He has moved past it all. But for Thorfinn, it's not so easy. Part of his apathy comes from the fact that he hates himself. Thorfinn now despises himself for what he's done over the past decade, and for what he left behind. I think he even despises himself for not being able to hate Askeladd anymore. He still holds on to some Norse ideals, as if not hating the man who killed his father would make him a coward. He's incredibly self-loathing, hung up on the fact that he's good at nothing but battle. Thorfinn simply can't see himself as a man with any value, even after months of searching for a will to live. When their wheat gets destroyed, Thorfinn can't even bring himself to feel anger because he believes he has no right to it. And in a way, he's correct. He spent the last decade looting, pillaging, and destroying things that didn't belong to him. This is his desert, and he feels he has no right to positive emotions or feelings of retribution. As Snake tells him, the good part about being empty is that you can fill yourself with anything. You have the liberty of choosing the type of man you want to be. This is the first step toward Thorfinn's true battle. Can he allow himself to become something else? Can he allow himself to feel again? To fill himself with emotion? But just as he's learning to live on the farm, he too is changing, learning patience, finding direction, and regaining his purpose. What I absolutely love about this story is that the first time Thorfinn tries to take a meaningful step toward growth, he fails. Because growth isn't linear. Thorfinn's relationship with violence is different from anyone else's. He has relied on it for so many years that it has become his battery, his fuel. It has harmed him deeply, shaping his self-perception. When he punches the farmhand, it accomplishes nothing. It only drags him back into the world he was comfortable in. But the fact that his mind took him there shows that he's feeling guilty. It means he's starting to feel something. The imagery here is powerful and horrifying, as souls pull Thorfinn back into the world he left behind. He doesn't remember them, but they remember him. Every single one of them. The people he wronged the most, like the old lady who combed his hair and nursed him back to health, are the ones he needs to satisfy. These are the ghosts he needs to appease. The one ghost he does remember is the man who has been at the center of his life for the past decade, Askeladd. He tells Thorfinn that he now has to accept what he's done. He has no choice. He will have to carry these souls and make it up to them. He'll carry this weight for the rest of his life, and the best he can do is bring them to a place where they can finally rest. The panel later on, where the souls are tugging on Thorfinn's shirt, pulling his arms down, is one of my favorite images in the entire series. It's a powerful illustration of how heavy his burden is, and how even one more death, Even one more soul would be too much. He says he has to carry them with him everywhere he goes. While Thorfinn fears for his life, his most prevalent emotion is regret. He is fully sobbing. He truly feels for these souls. Askeladd urges him to fight your true battle. His true battle is to never forget that place, that nightmare, and to never return to it. The true battle is overcoming himself, looking past a society that tells him what is right and wrong, a society that glorifies toxic, violent ideals. That's the battle Thor's wanted to win, and it's the one Askeladd was aware of but could never move past. Now he finally understands his father and what makes a true warrior. He's been asked that by Thorkel. He knows now that a true warrior is not made through the spoils of war. A true warrior is not defined by their strength or ability. A true warrior battles man's arrogance, pride, and propensity for violence, not with a sword, but with kindness and patience. A true warrior only fights to protect. They don't kill, and they are strong enough to walk away. Thor's, the strongest warrior in the story, was strong enough to walk away from that life, knowing he had something bigger to protect, something more important. Thor's chose love over pride and honor. That is what being a true warrior is. After these chapters, I finally took notice of how Thorfinn's face had changed, especially the way he's drawn in this panel. This is the first time we ever see Thorfinn genuinely smile and laugh. 73 chapters in, the Viking's face was burdened. The lines were always aggressive. He was always bloody and dirty, his hair never kept. But now, just like Einar calls him a baby for discovering so much of life for the first time, his face reflects his newfound purpose. Now, his eyes aren't the angry eyes of the Viking Thorfinn, nor are they the empty eyes of a man who is nothing. Finally, he now has the eyes of his father, eyes with an earnest desire to live. What makes Thorfinn's road to redemption so compelling is that he doesn't just stop here. It isn't enough to simply throw down my sword, he says. Atonement is not just words and a change of heart. Those are good starting points, and half the battle is won by desiring change. But the second half is even more challenging. Thorfinn says that a man must raise more grain than he has trampled in his life. Atonement requires action, and it finally all comes together when he comforts Arnheid with the promises of Vinland. At that moment, when he decides to make it his life goal to make Vinland a reality, he promises the souls a place where they can go to rest. He promises Arnheid a place where she would have a desire to live. This brand of non-violence that Thorfinn endorses is radical and often unreasonable. Einar tells him that there is no place in this world without violence. Thorfinn himself knows it's unrealistic, but again we go back to what Thorfinn has seen, the reason he is so vehemently against violence. It's those bodies that pull on his shirt, those souls that plague his sleep every single night. He still wakes up yelling even after he's changed. He is so against violence because of what he has done, because of that place he visited, the hell of endless slaughter. He is this way because he cannot bear even one more death, not one more death. He is so repulsed by it. He is so tired of death. His ideals are challenged constantly. He is put in compromising positions, like when he faces down Knut's army. But to prove his dedication, he withstands 100 blows. When he meets with Knut, he tells him that he will run away, though he has been absolutely pummeled. The man who hit him is not his enemy. Thorfinn believes that peace cannot be brokered through war, that the peace he seeks is not just a place without violence. It is a place where that hell he endured does not exist. It is a place where nobody has to carry the burdens of hundreds of souls haunting them. He knows that the souls weigh you down. He knows that not everyone is as lucky as he is to have escaped that place. Thorfinn's brand of peace and pacifism ensures that that place will never exist. Thorfinn's brand of peace ensures that everyone will have a desire to live, and then no one will question why they are alive. Vinland is a place where anyone and everyone can learn what the reason to live is: love, family, fun. These are the pillars of life that so many in their world have yet to experience, where so many have suffered and have lost. Arnheid sought out a reason to keep living. The slave back in the 3rd chapter sought out a reason to keep living. Both times they were soothed by the visions of Vinland, a place where they don't need to suffer. That is what life is supposed to be. Vinland Saga is set in the most brutal period of history, and yet it is a story about love, forgiveness, redemption, and kindness. A story of resilience. It is the story of a man who has accepted the harm he's done. He has not shied away from it. Now he finally understands that the thing he sought most, violence and the glory of war, is the very thing that poisons their world. Thorfinn doesn't ever ask anyone to forget his past. He makes it known time and again the man he was. There are people in the story that make him never forget it, that keep him accountable. But he blinds people with his goodness and radiance. When it came time to choose who Thorfinn was going to be, he chose what is considered weakness and cowardice in this world. He has tossed his pride aside and has chosen a path filled with incredible hardships. Thorfinn understands that choosing love and empathy is the most difficult path. Violence is the easiest. But those who can put their pride to the side, who can walk away, who can be loving and kind, that is the mark of the truly strong. He has finally understood why there is no one he needs to hurt. When Thorfinn and Einar reunite for the second time here on Ketil's farm, Thorfinn refuses to leave Arnheid and the fate of the farm in the hands of soldiers. He gives up his chance at freedom to save another, and to it, Einar tells Thorfinn that he is a man now. Fully grown men are not made through the fires of war and violence. They are not made when they've killed another. Men are made when they choose to help those in need. Men are made when they choose to live as kind men. Thorfinn has now made it his life's mission to create a place where no power can reach, a place no slaver knows, far to the west, across the great sea, and far, far beyond the horizon. This is the road to true redemption.